Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric E. Lopkin. And Uncle Joe, right, rushed over to Israel after January 6th and couldn't get, we're ironclad, we're lockstep.
After
And
October
now the
7th, you mean?
7th, sorry about that. Yeah, my bad.
Uh,
It's been a long day. Yep, but you get the gist.
yes.
Yeah, so after October 7th, these were it was lockstep. And the reason why I think that's important, because I believe, well, he's obviously demented. So he's thinking it's the Democratic Party and his constituency of the 1970s, 80s, whatever. So he thought it would be politically expedient. He could be the savior of Israel. Okay, this is what I truly believe. But then when he found out his party has left the station, and now the Democratic Party, according to someone I really love and hold in high regard, Victor Hansen, said one of many of the ramifications of the protest movement, but that it pulled the veil off of the Democratic Party. It used to be, I think we've kind of kicked this around on the show, that yes, there's some radicals, but you mentioned moderate Democrats, and this is just a little. No, the modern Democratic Party is a anti-American, socialist, anti-Israeli, and anti-Semitic party. So there is no such thing as a moderate Democrat. You can even look at our friends like Jerry Nadler, who basically in the middle of a Jewish person, Jewish senator, in the middle of Israel's fight for their very existence, called Netanyahu the worst Jewish leader in 2,000 years. But getting back to Uncle Joe, he's now withholding critical arms shipments right at the moment where Israel can break the back of Hamas. Your thoughts, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. There are no moderate Democrats, and I can name a
Very
couple.
few. It's an endangered
I
species.
can
I'm
yes,
adamant about that.
but they're fighting
Bullshit.
back. Take a look at Fetterman. Take a look at Manchin. They are fighting back. The
There's like
problem
three of them.
the problem is that the radical part of the party is essentially holding these people hostage. You know,
They got no balls.
the only two-state solution Biden has any interest in is Minnesota and Michigan. He's terrified he's going to lose them. But I think it's more important to note that it doesn't even matter who the moderate politicians are. The fact of the matter is, we have had absolute proof, and in fact, in some cases, they've come out and admitted that these protests are being funded by the same people that are funding the Democratic Party. And that's where the danger lies. You're talking about the Rockefellers, the Soroses. These are the folks that are pulling the party in whatever direction they feel like by withholding funds, by funding these protests. And let's not pretend that this is some great student protest, that they care so much about Palestine and the
They
Palestinian
don't even know where
plight.
Palestine. They
Most
don't even know where Palestine is on the map.
most of the students involved in these protests, one, don't have any idea of what they're protesting. And in fact, they've yelled about things from free Palestine to pass the Green New Deal to require EV. They have no clue. It's just become a left wing wish list. And let's also dismiss the idea of peaceful protests. These folks are nothing but vandals. At George Washington University, a video surfaced where they are calling for the beheading of the college administration. So let's not pretend that these are good hearted people with the best intentions.
May I
Also,
ask you a question? May I ask you a question about GW? By the way, not exactly an Ivy League school, but that's another topic for debate. Um, in applications and enrollments for 2024, you are a genius consultant, but I don't think you really have to be. Down what, 10, 20, or 30%, Dr. Lopkins? Can you please answer that?
I believe the
I'm
last
going to say
stat
like
The last stat I had actually has it as larger than that. Admission across the board is down almost 45%.
There you go. Anyone who would send their kid and spend, it's an extremely expensive school, like 90 grand a year. I mean, yes. And and to send them to that shithole with the president as the friggin' cojones of a basically salamander is pathetic. You know, letting George Washington statue just have a, Palestinian flag on it and so on and so forth. Pathetic. Destroyed their reputation. And speaking of destroying reputation, I'd like your input on this. It's really interesting. They had a guest, a Jewish girl, and her father, who is a Columbia graduate, who will be graduating. And I thought this was fascinating that, you have something, a black mark on your resume. Well, 10 years ago, Columbia or any Ivy League is like you're in the driver's seat. It's actually can be used held against you. Isn't that a turning
It's
strange
it's more than
strange turn
being
of events?
held, it's more than just being held against people. We have had in the past week, I believe, about a dozen and a half federal judges come out and say they will not hire any clerks from Columbia because clearly Columbia is not teaching the law. They are indoctrinating. So if you went to Columbia, especially Columbia law, forget it. Your career is over before it started because of all of this.
Can you blame anyone?
No,
And can
not
you
at
blame?
all.
Can you do agree with another commentator I heard? We're raising what I've seen, and I agree with him at this point. We're raising a generation of morons. If the Ivy League is indicative of your best and your brightest, like the book of the early '60s said, then we are in deep trouble. We truly are raising a group, a generation of morons that they're protesting, spoiled brats, and they're demanding this woman, this girl Slutsky, demanding gluten-free pizza. She's gotten 20 million hits on this, and they're not good. Her career, talk about burning in flames. Maybe Walmart might hire her, but I'm really not sure that's true.
No,
Not
most
sure.
most of these folks have absolutely no career possibilities. Kevin O'Leary, not too long ago, was talking about the fact that thanks to high-res photography and AI now, they will employers have the ability to identify any one of these protesters, even if they're wearing masks. As long as their eyes are visible, they can tell who these people are, and they are going to basically just be tossed in the circular file. Their resumes are not going to be looked at. Their careers are over. And in fact, and again, going even further than just Columbia, I'll be real honest. On a personal note, I just met with a private public partnership that promotes internships for high school students. I am now looking for interns right from the high schools. I'm not even looking at the colleges anymore because if this is what they're teaching, I want to get to the kids before they're brainwashed.
Dr. Eric E. Lopkin, I could not agree with you more. 100%. A bright, ambitious. I'm also thinking a little more on the blue collar side. I don't want Biffy and Buffy, and I certainly don't want Biffy and Buffy from Columbia that's demanding gluten free as they protest. And also, I don't want these shitheads anywhere near me. They actually protested, a group of pro Palestinian protesters, amazing, protesting at the Holocaust Museum during the event today.
Well, the fact of the matter is, most of these protesters have no idea what the Holocaust was. So the fact that they were there, they probably didn't even know the significance. And and again, I mentioned earlier that across the board, the last stat I saw was that college enrollment is down 45%. I want to clarify that that is for a 4-year colleges. trade schools and community colleges are actually seeing their enrollments rise because they're free of these things. And quite frankly, an associate's degree and a professional certification are now more valuable than your bachelor's and certainly more valuable than doctorates.
You know something? I think that is exceptionally well done, Dr. Lopkin, because you know something? You're screwing around 4 years learning about, friggin' the Dark Ages and the Renaissance. That's all great. Go read it in a book, right? I think life is, it's what, but colleges are still before the 20th century. That's where they're frozen in. Okay, no one has. You can get the knowledge you need in two. Get the professional certifications. You're all good. To me, I agree with you. If I'm an employer, I go, this he or she, this young person, they're on the ball. They got it. That's what I don't
Yes.
need. 5 years at Columbia learning about how the PLO is fantastic and Jews are like the Antichrist. It's just completely unbelievable. And I think it's really funny because I love, again, Victor Hansen said he had the greatest line ever. He goes, "The monster has now come to eat Frankenstein. You cannot get
It,
any better than that."
that is
That is the greatest line I have heard in a month. How do you like that, Dr.
that,
Lopkin?
that is
It's been
absolutely accurate. That is what happened. And you're seeing the results of the monster eating Dr. Frankenstein in the political polls because Biden is losing centrists because he's been wishy-washy about backing Israel. He's losing the radical left because he hasn't abandoned them completely. And he's losing more centrists because they're looking at these protests and going, I don't want to be my tax money going to forgive their student loans.
What do you think is going to happen, though? Yes, I agree with all of that, Dr. Lopkin. What do you think happens when he allows the Palestinian refugees into America? Refugees that, and this has been going on for years, by the way, that Egypt, all the Arab neighbors have no interest in letting them step foot in their country, but we're going to bring in Palestinian refugees. When I heard another great commentary that had basically, why why is this happening? Well, one of, not the only reason, is who we're letting into this country. This person talked about his neighbor, who's not an old, a middle-aged Muslim couple. Beautiful people, he said. But yes, they want to be a part of America. They're excellent contributors to America. Okay, they love America. This new group, which started with George W. after 9/11, they're radical, anti-Israeli, anti-American radicals. I mean, it's you invited people to the party. You
Well,
invited the five drunks to your party, and guess what? Your house is demolished. Duh.
I'm actually going to push back a little bit about the going back to George W. part, because the fact of the matter is, any of the people that came through under George W., these are middle aged to senior people already, and they're not the ones that are radicalized. It's the younger generation that's been radicalized. So it's more recent. But realistically, what difference does it make if we let them in? Or if they go to Mexico first and walk in over the border illegally, they're still going to be
Well said.
here.
And it's a wink and a nod. Well said, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin. It's one half dozen of the other, isn't it? But I still think optically it's not going to look good for Uncle Joe, even though it can't look too much worse when you have Palestinian refugees. 70% of them are basically 100% on board with the destruction of Israel and America. That's a well thought out strategy, Uncle Joe. It goes back to Gates when he said, never, I'm sorry, Obama said this one, never underestimate the ability for Uncle Joe to F things up. Gates said
Right.
he's never been right.
Gates said he's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision for 50 years, and Biden shows no indication that he wants to change that track record. He's
You
still
know,
every decision he makes is on the wrong side of history.
I give him credit for this because usually you don't improve when you get older. He's improved. He went from 100% being absolutely the worst decision. And now he's at 120% of bad decisions. So he's actually improved upon things. So that's kind of maybe inspirational. He also, so speaking of inspiration, to the illegal aliens make model citizens. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Any comment?
I'll explain that comment a little bit because at one point that was actually true. People that came into the country illegally tended to be model citizens because we had an immigration system that was actively tracking them down and deporting them if they did anything wrong. If they committed a crime, they were immediately deported. That's no longer the case. Illegal immigrants don't fear ICE because you have these sanctuary cities who have actually passed laws prohibiting their police from cooperating with immigration and customs enforcement. And quite frankly, I think any city that has passed a law forbidding local authorities from working with federal authorities, no matter what those authorities are, they need to lose all federal funding.
No, something. No, no, no. Dr. Lopkin, once again, you're right. This is BS, okay? And it's our government's fault. It's not just Uncle Joe. It's going on for a while. I mean, we just let things happen. We're like, we, you know what we are? We're like the lovable loser. We just let things never respond. Oh, I've been unemployed for 3 years. I might want to start looking for a job one of these days. No, it's duh. Isn't that common sense? You don't want to follow the federal. Guess you're getting no funding. There you go.
Well,
Hello, genius.
there is no common sense in politics. I actually had this conversation with a local politician just earlier this week. There is a crisis in Connecticut higher education about funding. And he was talking about the fact that the legislature needs to approve more funding for the colleges. Otherwise, their only option is going to be to raise tuition. Well, first of all, that's not the only option. Politicians tend to think the only option to solve a problem is throw money at it. No, the option is to look at how these colleges are being run and see where they're wasting all of this
100%.
money.
100%.
So you need to fix the problem, not throw money at it to disguise it. And that is what politicians do. And it's not party politics because the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats are.
May I tell you a little story, Dr. Eric Elak?
Go ahead.
I work at a university, okay, and I'm a part-time lecturer, professor, whatever you want to call it. And enrollments have been slightly declined, whatever. In that 10-year period, there's been a construction boom. It's like a corporation losing market share making widgets. Let's say so they open up 10 new factories to make those same widgets, even though the demand for widgets are going down. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Did they have to really build the new business building? They just built one 5 years ago. What's going on here? So, yes, to your point, 100% correct. Do you really? And the other thing, Victor Hansen, my buddy, my BFF, said a very interesting thing. How much is this old DEI, equity, and all this other bullshit cost per dollar of tuition? You would be shocked.
Well, DEI has become a money pit. There has been so much sunk into it that we just this Sunday we got an announcement from MIT. MIT is now the first elite university to say they are no longer requiring DEI statements in their hiring process. They are getting rid of it because they have finally realized that it doesn't work. You don't.
Wait, can I just interject one thing? Did it take an MIT degree to come to that conclusion?
Apparently it did. Because the fact of the matter is, when you judge somebody based on their race, religion, gender, rather than their intelligence, their abilities, their qualifications, When you do this, you do not get the best and the brightest. You want people to be absolutely colorblind and look at the qualifications of professors. What have they actually done? Are they intelligent? No. I mean, we have Harvard again. I said, oh, that reminds me. Yes,
Gay.
last week I made a comment about Harvard hiring Mayor McCheese and Captain Neckfat. Yeah. And I have to say, we at the end of each episode, we always tell people they can contact us with feedback. We actually got feedback on that comment. So I am going to publicly apologize, because if one person had said this, I would have just laughed. But we got numerous comments about this, saying that my comment about that was offensive to the McDonald's Corporation and Mayor McCheese. And it was insulting to Mayor McCheese to compare him to Lori Lightfoot. So I apologize to McDonald's. I apologize to any of our listeners. But yes, but this is what's going on. They're not hiring the best and the brightest. And now you're seeing it in these protests that these folks don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the history of Israel or Palestine. I'm guessing that not one of them would actually be able to identify the history of Palestine if you told them three different stories.
100%. And Alan Dershowitz, ex-professor at Harvard, he basically he attributed DEI as a major cause of all this unrest and rampant anti-Semitism.
He's absolutely right, because all DEI has done is say you cannot discriminate against our chosen categories, which in the most case tend to be Hispanic and African American, and to a lesser extent Muslims. So what that does is it shifts people discriminating against Jews, against Asians, against Caucasians. DEI was supposed to eliminate discrimination, but that's not what it did. All it did was shift it. We need to work to be colorblind, so that your color, your race, your religion doesn't matter, and you are judged as an individual based on merit, based on what you have accomplished.
Well said, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin, but we will see. I think it's really interesting. It definitely has been a sea change. And I'll refer last time to my BFF, Victor Hansen. He said, these institutions are no longer elite learning institutions. They've replaced DEI. No, they've eliminated their standards and replaced it with DEI a long time ago. Well said, my BFF.
It's exactly true. And we're seeing that ripple through society, because we just saw Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. Here's a Mensa candidate for you. If Joe Biden has been losing ground in the African American community, well, Hochul may very well have just tanked it for him when she came out and said, there are blacks that don't even know what a computer is.
Yeah, don't know how to spell it. She goes, most blacks don't know how to spell a computer. But you know something? She's a moron. She's an idiot. Okay, no question about it. But it's like that guy, the gentleman you used to work with. He's now on
Charles Payne.
Fox Business. Yes, he said the most racist people he ever met was in the Northeast, in your liberal blue areas, because they're patronizing, and deep down they're nice on the outside, but they really think you're a dumbass in the inside. And that goes right to what the esteemed governor said. There is no question about it.
And that is the core of the problem with DEI, because DEI makes the assumption that an individual cannot succeed if they are part of a specific race, religion, or gender without elite help. So it's our job to help them. It's like, no, you know what? Most of them will be more successful without the interference.
Well,
Give them
actually, let
the
me go one step further. The Great Society and all these great liberal theoretical bullshit assumptions have done the opposite. They have destroyed the black community. DEI. If you did that, if you told a friend of yours that I know you're not capable, Bob, Fred, Nancy, whatever, and I'm going to let you do this, then they'd probably say that's insulting. I'm not. I'm no longer your friend. You think of me that
right.
way? Of course they would. But speaking of the left's less intellectually privileged, we have Uncle Joe's new campaign strategy, and it's Joe Light. It's less is more. Beautiful.
Yes. The campaign has decided that Joe is going to do fewer appearances and those appearances will be shorter. And let's face it. The main reason for this is they know once he's out there for more than 10 minutes, he starts making up his stories and reading the
Cannibals.
teleprompter. Right, and reading the teleprompter stage directions. So they know he's not capable. But rather than saying, you know what, he can't do the job, we need to put up a Democrat that can, no, they're doubling down. So now you have him taking the long way around to Marine One, surrounded by his staff, so the media can't see how badly he's stumbling. He can't take questions from them. And you had I'm blanking on her name, the former press secretary who's now on MSNBC.
Yeah,
Jen
whatever.
Jen Psaki.
Jen Psaki.
Yes. We saw Jen Psaki on The View saying, no, it's fine that he's not doing press interviews. He should stick to these softball interviews like Howard Stern did and go on The View where they're just going to kiss his ass rather than an interview that's actually going to give the viewers a good idea of who he is and what he is capable of.
Can you blame her?
They're trying to hide his incompetence. And
Can you blame them?
what's really funny about it is Joe is pushing back. He wants he wants to be out there. He wants to be giving speeches. And everybody in his campaign knows that the only way he's going to get reelected is if they can put him back in the basement and run the campaign from there.
There's no question about it, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin. Mr. Sherman believes that that is not a winnable strategy. I think we'll talk about the court cases in a little bit, but as they blow up and implode, you're going to have the two tales of two cities. You're going to have Trump out there being, funny, engaging, people genuinely digging him. They don't have to wait for a pause line to applaud. And you have Uncle Joe wandering around the stage with like 10 people. Obviously, they're all paid to be there. It's not a good look. So I think less is more. I'm glad less is more because I can barely take them, but it's not really a good situation. And another bad situation for Uncle Joe that his faith in his economic strategy, I think 73% are not in favor of Uncle Joe's. And I don't know why that's a surprise, Gomer Pyle. Surprise, surprise, because real inflation's around 18%. That makes Jimmy Carter look like a rock star. And plus, you also have this EV mandate imploding, imploding. You have, you talk about the Who as we're on like rock stars, teenage wasteland. Well, now you have EV wasteland because number one, they're all on the lots. No one wants them. It's even bigger than that because cars in general are on the lots because interest rates are around 10%. But there's also, I found this amazing, there's an EV graveyard for EV cars that have not been repaired because it's too expensive. You don't have the
Yeah,
money. They're living payday. You can't afford $30,000 for a what? 30,000? Yes, but there's an EV graveyard.
Yeah, Democratic strategists have actually told the campaign to stop talking about the economy because every time he does, it shows he's out of touch with America. He's looking at certain statistics. And yes, there are certain parts of the economy which are still strong. But
For now.
now we're looking at slowing GDP. Inflation is still rising. And the Fed president in, I believe it was Minnesota, I think it was, the Fed from the Midwest, said the other day at a conference that he does not believe the Fed is going to cut interest rates this year
They
unless
can't.
unless inflation severely drops, and they don't see any sign of that happening. So you've got people who have not been able to make ends meet were putting essentials like groceries and utility bills on their credit cards. Credit card interest rates are going up because inflation keeps going up. It's put the middle class in a major bind. Joe keeps talking about building the economy from the bottom up. Well, building it from the bottom up has killed the poor and the middle class. The only people who have not been affected by this are his elite buddies that, that can afford all of this.
Yes, his elite buddies that are funding the radical left, but that's another something we've touched on earlier. Uh, Getting back to the court, let's touch upon the court cases. We have the Stormy effect. Interesting courtroom drama yesterday. Depends what media outlet that you access, but my takeaway: some salacious details. She had no reason to be on the stand because she's not, she doesn't determine anything in terms of guilt or innocence, and not so sure it didn't blow up in the prosecution's face. Your thoughts? And also outline this as the show trial it is. Go ahead.
Oh, it's absolutely a show trial. So far,
Did it blow up?
every prosecution witness has blown up the case because they have all said exactly what was done, which was not illegal. And they all said, well, no, we never spoke to Donald Trump about it. No, we don't know if Donald Trump actually knew that it was going on. Stormy Daniels took the case to a new level, and not a level that Alvin Bragg should be proud of. And even at one point, the defense called for a mistrial. And even though the judge denied the mistrial, which quite frankly, I've heard numerous legal pundits say that was the fatal blow, because that means no matter if they manage to convict, which even liberal pundits at this point are starting to doubt. But if they do, this whole thing is going to be overturned on Stormy Daniels' testimony because she should never have been there. And the judge, in criticizing the testimony, should have removed her from the case and actually just said, no, this is a mistrial. But when he didn't, Jonathan Turley, who's if you don't know him, he's a legal analyst. He phrased it brilliantly with a quote paraphrasing from the movie Casablanca, going, "I'm shocked to find out there's a porn star in my courtroom."
Oh, that's fantastic. That's excellent.
It was
That is excellent.
The hypocrisy of the judge was on full display. That case is falling apart. And we've heard more and more Democrats say they are absolutely appalled that this was the first case to go.
I've heard that many times.
To go, because this case is so bad, it's going to taint all of the other cases. Although now we're starting to see those cases may be falling apart all on their own.
Oh, yeah. The documents case is put on indefinite hold, and Fannie looks like she's in trouble. Comment on the Fannie first. No, that was a bad joke. You have to comment on Georgia first. Go ahead.
Yes. Fannie Willis when they were investigating her conflict of interest, the judge gave them the choice that either she or her lover could leave, but one of them had to go. The Trump defense team appealed that decision, saying the judge should have removed both. And the Georgia appellate court has upheld that appeal. So they are now going to hear arguments over whether or not Willis can stay on the case. If she is removed, that case falls apart. And if it doesn't fall apart, if they do remove her, the timing on that case, there's going to be no way they can schedule it before the election.
And that might be true with the Florida case too. The document that's put on indefinite hold.
The classified documents case is currently on indefinite hold. The judge has said there's no way to go forward with it at this point, given the pretrial motions and the wait for the Supreme Court on the decision of presidential immunity. So they have taken it off the docket and put it on indefinite hold. When the Supreme Court heard arguments against for and against presidential immunity, a number of pundits on both sides said, no, the only way the document case can go forward before the election is if the Supreme Court says the president has no immunity whatsoever, and no pundit on either side of the aisle believes that's what the Supreme Court is going to do. The majority think they're going to kick it back to the appellate for another trial, and then they may have to hear it again, depending on what the appellate court says. But at this point, it doesn't look like that trial's going to go forward before the election either.
I have a good idea.
And let's face it, that was the point of the timing of all of these.
The only point.
It was to take Trump off the campaign trail and to be able to tarnish his reputation and go, look, he's a criminal. You can't vote for him. Well, they played the cards too soon, because now, everybody's been making a big deal. Are they going to debate? Are they not going to debate? Why haven't they agreed to debate yet? Well, quite frankly, historically, no presidents have ever had a debate prior to the conventions. All the presidential debates are after the party conventions, and those don't occur till August. Well, by moving these up and trying to use them as political weapons against Trump, one, they've actually bolstered his poll ratings, and two, essentially they've said, we have to resort to dirty tricks because we can't beat him on the merits.
Well, wait. That's the only time the Democrats have been honest. That's actually true. I agree with it 100%. Not what they did, but their understanding. Mano on mano, it's over, dude. It's over before it started. So yes, I think that is actually true. And we'll see how it all plays out. I do have an idea for a show. How about a new version of Perry Mason? It's called Legal 2024. And you have Fannie, you have Bragg, you have Letitia, and it's a comedy, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a comedy. And you have them, like Perry, we used to have, I object, and they're like, I was thinking that, I don't know anything about law. Just throw some shit against the wall. I don't know. Anyway, speaking of two people I hold in high regard is the Squad. Many Squad members have called for Netanyahu to be arrested. And one of the Squad members, the one I like the most, Ms. Omar, may be facing a censure. You know what I like about this before you comment? Because I like it because you're going to have the pig Democrats. And, I love you like a brother, but I'm not as positive or on the download in terms of Democrats. My own opinion is if you're a Democrat, it's guilt by association, but that's another show. But they'll be forced to vote no for the censure. and that it will be part of their record. I think that's fantastic. And a record that a Republican candidate can run against. There you go.
That is going to be key. And in fact, that is why I believe it was last week, the House voted on a definition of anti-Semitism. And yes, the left-wing Democrats, including Jerry Nadler, who is Jewish
Yes, who
himself,
called
voted.
whoa. Jew in name only. He's the one who said that Netanyahu's the worst Jewish leader in 2,000 years, and there's many of them that make me less than happy about being Jewish at times. Go ahead, Dr. Lopkin.
But there were Democrats that voted against the definition. And we're going to see that come back to bite them. But the majority of Democrats did say, no, we cannot support anti-Semitism, and voted for this definition. Now, the reason this is important is because the definition is what the Department of Education would use when they investigate these college protests. So we've seen the wishy-washy Democrats be more afraid of being labeled anti-Semitic than they are of losing the radical left. So we'll see what happens when the censure comes up. And I mean, it could just be on party lines, which quite frankly, if it is strictly on party lines, then yes, she would be censured. And the reason she is being censured is because she accused Jews, not Israel. She accused Jews of being pro-genocide. And that is anti-Semitic. So they do have the case to censure her. And quite frankly, they need to, because they have been far too tolerant of the anti-Semitism coming from the squad and from those weak-willed Democrats who keep kowtowing to the squad.
No question about it. But on a more humanitarian note, I did look at her wedding pictures, and her brother, husband, made a great groom.
Dr. Lop. It is absolutely amazing how the media will absolutely pounce on a Republican killing a puppy 10 to 15 years ago. But Democrats are capable of the most disgusting behavior, and they let it pass. And it is absolutely, we just had Democratic congressman from Texas. I'm forgetting his name. He was just indicted, he and his wife, on bribery charges. And the media has been pretty silent on it. If it was a Republican, remember, what's his name? George, that they kicked out of the Congress. The Republican.
Oh, yeah, Santos.
George Santos. He was never actually convicted of anything, and they were all over him. But folks that are actually indicted with evidence, no, that's okay. We don't need to cover that.
Well, I hope you don't get a cease and desist from McDonald's, because it is defamation of character, and that was one of your greatest ones, and there's many. So you outdid yourself, Dr. Lopkin. But for our listeners that would like to comment on our show, how can they do that?
Yes, you can go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Message us there. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Send us a message there. And of course, you can listen to all of the Carnivore Bites episodes at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin. You were on fire today. I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.